In this video, you're gonna learn how to train for a flat marathon course so you can run faster, avoid fatigue, and maximize your performance on race day. And I'm also, as a bonus, gonna be touching on how to pace a flat marathon without burning out, the best long run strategy for a flat course, why flat races feel harder than hilly ones, starting runs earlier, and a bunch more. I'm Darren D. Lake Runs, sub 3 hour marathoner, 10-hour Ironman finisher, and I am all about being 1% better habitually every day with running, life, etc., and helping you out with all these tips and tricks. Let's get into it. So I got a message from Adam, who I've done a whole episode with. We ran with him. We talked about habits and consistency. You can check that out up here. And he hit me up and he was like, yo, Darren, I have been doing this hilly run for a while. My heart rate's high. I've got a flat course coming up. I don't know, how should I do it? The hills obviously make me stronger, but they're also topping me out and I'm starting to redline with my heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, all right, cool. So I basically ran down a whole bunch of kind of bullets that I said at the beginning, and I'm going to go through them quickly with this, and we'll get kind of to each point. And I decided, I was like, look, if I'm going to help him, I might as well help you, because I'm sure everyone's got different courses that they can train on, and then they can race on totally different courses. So I'll just jump right into the first point, which is why training for flat is different. Flat courses require sustained effort, and there's no natural breaks from hills. So that's like one area that, if you believe in the principle of specificity, or I call it the law of specificity, you need to do the thing, you need to practice the thing if that's going to be your main race. So if you're running on a trail and it's undulating up and down hills, then you need to be doing a trail run, undulating hills as much as you can, or run on grass, or, you know, like do a treadmill if you have to, and constantly change the terrain, or get one of those kind of pre-programmed things in the treadmill. So the goal is to do what the course is. Obviously, running hills is going to make you stronger for flat, but kind of gets to the next place that if you're always training on hills and it's constantly changing, you might get mentally bored and physically fatigued from the constant pace. This happens a lot with cyclists. This happened when I did my Ironman, and people would train on hilly courses so they can kind of get up, rest, you know, different types of positions. But what happens is you need to be in those flat bars, and this is a bike analogy, for 180 kilometers, 5-6 hours, and you get bored, you get tired, your back hurts. So it's the same with running. If you're constantly running on flat pavement and you're not used to it, you're gonna get tired, and you're going to be using muscles very long, and even your brain is going to get tired. So you need to practice and train on the course at least 6 to 8 weeks out if you can. So that's 1 and 2, which is why training for flat is different, and course specific training. The marathon that we have coming up, which I'm actually pacing Brenton, who I did an episode with, to do his first sub 3 hour marathon with in hopefully a few months whenever this gets released. But it will be a very flat course. It's gonna be 90 meters, which I think is about 270 feet, which is extremely flat. Like, that's pancake flat. I mean, maybe a beach up and down is gonna be flatter than that. So the Sydney Marathon, I live in Sydney, Australia. I'm obviously American, but been here 13 years. The Sydney Marathon is very, very hilly. I think it's the hilliest major marathon. So this runner, Adam, is trying to train for both the Ballarat Marathon in April and then the Sydney Marathon in September. And I was like, you need to pick one. You need to focus on the main one that's coming up. Another thing we talked about, or I gave him kind of advice on, which was adjusting the training load. So flat running equals steady pacing, unlike hills where effort varies, obviously. You want to avoid pace drift. So slight pace changes affect your endurance. Obviously, if you're going uphill, your pace will actually go down. And then when you go downhill, your pace goes up, and then your heart rate goes down. So even though it's like, yeah, I guess it evens itself out. So you need to get used to just running along at your marathon pace for 20, 30 Ks. What's that? 12, 20, 15 miles, 20 miles, depending on how advanced you are before the race, weeks before the race. But you need to be able to do that. And train your muscles, your joints, your ligaments. They all will be used to whatever you've been training to. You don't want race day to be new. Yes, you've done the kilometers, and yes, you've done the miles, and you've done the time on your feet, but you need to have done the terrain. Treadmills can help if you don't have it, or you can simulate in a lot of different ways, which leads to my next point, the science behind flat course fatigue. So there's heart rate variability in hills versus steady state on flat. you need to sort that out early. Stride length also changes and your cadence changes. So when you go uphill, you probably have a shorter stride length. And then when you go downhill, you might have a longer one, and you might have a lower cadence when you go downhill and a higher cadence when you go uphill. And that will mess with your brain. That will mess with your muscles. Like they're all like used to a certain way. In the race, it's like, this is different. You can't have that. And this is to the next point, adjusting the running plan. So this is like how he does it. And I basically said he needs to do more loops of whatever flat area. So he has a problem where he lives in a very hilly area. I'm sure a lot of people have that problem. Here in Sydney, it's kind of hilly, kind of flat. I always know where, if I want to do flat, I can go here. If I want to do hills, I can go here. And it does take some preemptive thinking. You have to go, okay, what am I doing today? What course can I do this on? And you have to map it out. So you have to go out, ride your bike or run over and check out the area, drive if you have to, and check the area out. And Google Maps has elevation. Strava, you can plan your route and you can see the elevation, and then you can plot it out. So you can have a 1 mile out and back. It'll just be a line. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Obviously, the longer, the better. He likes to do really pretty loops, and I like them too. I'm a big fan of loops, but sometimes I'm like, no, I just need to do an outback, or you know what? I need to do this weird kind of thing here and then come here and then come here. And he actually did that on the next run, and hopefully we'll have a little map of how it is and what he did. But you just have to do that. You have to adapt your training, and the map's not going to be pretty, and the run might be boring, but guess what? You actually will find that looping things and having points and knowing where things are will help you on those longer runs and those harder, faster runs. I've found, especially when you're getting into kind of marathons that have 2 or 3 loops, you actually know, like, all right, this is the point when I do this. All right, I'm getting tired. I know how to do that. You can actually mentally mind map it, and it helps you understand. Whereas if you're doing one big loop in like a marathon, like most marathons on one big loop, every single kilometer, every single mile is brand new. And your brain, if you've never done that course, most likely you haven't done that course. The courses change even if you have every single year. You actually know the point if it's loops. So doing the loops actually gets you ready for the training. Possibly not the marathon, but at least you're doing the terrain. So you want to find loops or some sort of an out and back or some sort of a new course that is flat. And you can save the hill training for races that demand it. So again, we've got Sydney Marathon, which is the hilliest major. The city is extremely hilly. So this leads to one of the last points, which is overtraining and overreaching. Future Darren here, and I won't do that thing. You know the thing where people go, hey, you should subscribe, rate, share, give a thumbs up, rah, rah, rah. Now, while I'd love for you to do that anyways, please go ahead and do it. The next steps will be for you to transform your running life with our free 1% Better Runner 30-day base training habits plan and newsletter. Unlike other running plans and newsletters, we do not do motivational quick fixes and hacks. Instead, we focus on long-term success that lasts from 30 days to 30 years and more. It's not just a training plan, but a mental shift. Think of it as your personal running therapist. Sign up for free at either dlatecreates.com/news, web search 1% Better Runner newsletter, or get the link in the show notes or video description below. All value, no fluff, cancel anytime. Let's get back into it. The last points, which is overtraining and overreaching. Now, a problem that he might have is that while overreaching is what you want, overreaching is fatigue, but you get gain. So it's pushing your body to the limit. So it stresses itself and then it rebuilds. But overtraining is a full shutdown. And you don't know because they both are very similar. And the reason why this is related to what he's doing with his heart rate going up in the hills is that him pushing his heart rate, Adam, 5 to 10 BPMs on average for 2-3 hours, month on month. He wants to do this for a couple years. Like, he's going to be burning himself out, and he's going to be touching more overtraining and possibly get overtraining syndrome, which I had, which was horrendous. And I'm going to do an episode on that. Overtraining syndrome I've had it twice. It is no bueno. I had a mild case of it and I couldn't get my heart rate over zone 2 for 2 months, or I felt like trash. I was waking up 4 or 5 times a night having to pee. My sympathetic system, nervous system, was in absolute shock, which destroyed my parasympathetic, which is the relaxing. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. And they basically were just like, no. And this is the kicker with overtraining versus overreaching. This is why they're both very similar, is that overtraining looks like overreaching, and you actually have this bump for, I think it's like up to a week or two that I had, and everyone has, and I've read about it, where your sympathetic system takes over and you actually get like this amazing rush and you actually feel really good for a week. And you're like, oh, you're killing your times and everything. So then you train even harder. That's the crazy risk of overtraining, is that you end up putting yourself more into the hole and then it's done. I was 2 months out. I know some people that have been 3 to 6 months. A guy that I was coaching, a cyclist, and some pros get 6 to 12 months of overtraining syndrome. And the thing about overtraining syndrome, it's like a recession. You don't know it until it's happened. So they don't call recessions until a recession has happened. Overtraining syndrome, you don't know it until you have it. So it's not like one of those things like, I think I'm in overtraining. It's like, no, you will have it. And you need to go to an exercise physiologist, someone that can check out your endocrine system. You don't want this, because then if you go to overtraining syndrome, you can't train for your marathon. And then guess what? You're not going to get faster. So the whole point, this is kind of like, don't die. And this is the whole don't do any harm. Rule number 1, like, don't hurt yourself to where you can't show up 1% better each day, to be consistent, to be habitual, to get better. Increment, step by step, increment on increment, and then that's how you get better. But if you take 2 months off, 3 months off, where you just back everything down, you don't get better. So to kind of wrap up the overtraining, overreaching, cortisol levels shoot up, disrupted sleep, stress, free radicals, they all get released and they just wreak havoc on your system. You don't want that. You want to stress your body out a little bit, recover, come back a day or two later, stress your body out a little bit, recover. Take every 3 weeks, take 1 week off, or every 4 weeks, every 2 weeks, whatever you need. So adjust your intensity and volume to stay in that sweet spot so that you can get the gains forever. And the last thing is about training in the heat. So Adam likes to go out about 8:30 a.m. And I see that now we're in the middle of summer and it's very hot where he is because he's down in Melbourne and he's fighting the hills and the heat. We obviously can't take away the heat, but we can try to train earlier. So I offered the suggestion of, hey, why don't you just get out early, 6 o'clock, 5:30 if you can, when the sun is not even out, when the sun is low below the earth or very, very low and it's not heating up. And the temperature outside is, I think, 20, 21 degrees in the mornings Celsius, which is about 67 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way better than going out at 8:30 and the temperature's already got up to 26 degrees Celsius, 27 degrees Celsius, which is already in the low 80s. And that can help his heart rate stay lower. He can get better high quality volume out of his training, better high quality sessions out of his training, and he can train better and he can start gauging, is he ready? Can he adjust his paces? Can he go a bit faster, et cetera, et cetera. So paying attention to effort is another thing, and not really paying attention to heart rate is what I suggested. And heart rate is great when you're starting out. It's a great governor. You have like kind of an upper and lower limit. But the problem is that you have so many variabilities with heart rate that looking at that only metric, it can mess you up. Pace is great, but if you have a hilly course, pace is going to mess you up. They have the gap, the grade adjusted pace time on Strava, but even that, it's like, unless you have a course, you don't get that real time. So you got to see it afterwards. So my whole thing is power. And I actually did an episode on power up here and training with power and a power meter, not the Garmin power meter. I think Coros has power meter also, but an actual Stride power meter, STRYD, no E at the end. And it is phenomenal because it actually validates my effort. So effort is like, oh, this needs to start at a 5 out of 10 and then end at a 7.5 out of 10. And I need to validate that with my watts. I'm looking at my watch because I see the watts and it's like, what are my watts for this lap? And you need to do it's kind of like an FTP test of sorts, like a functional threshold power test. So it's similar heart rate zones, but I really like power. So it's a bit more advanced, but if you want to just validate everything against heart rate, against elevation, all that, and just know like, I need to do a 7 out of 10 effort and I need the power to be 7 out of 10. Boom. That's how I know that. So that was a lot. Went over small changes with effort, validating power, and then changing up to run earlier, overtraining versus overreaching, key adjustments in the running plan. So doing more looped runs and flat courses and changing how he trains and the type of terrain that he trains on, or at least the map, the science behind flat course fatigue, adjusting training load, and course specificity, and the whole why training is flat and different versus hilly courses and why we should do that. Let me know if you got any questions. I'm all about helping people and I'd love to help anyone out there. There's a link below if you want to get a free habits download and base training guide. You'll sign up for the email newsletter with a bunch more stuff that can help you perform and live 1% better in your running life. Thanks for rocking. Peace. If you want to find out more about what we talked about in this last episode that you just listened to or watched, go to this next video right here.